Snake Pliskinist, it's nice to make your acquaintance. I feel like we're, I too have been whaling, and I feel like we're meeting here, and I'm able to, I've heard tales of your recent escapades in the North Pacific. And I feel like we're meeting here in a whaling man's pub, where whaling is a metaphor for talking to Ethelists. Yeah, 1832 or so. I'm a naturalist. I never really intended to harpoon any of the whales. They think you are, but you're just tagging them. You're just tagging them just for their migratory. They were in no harm. There was no real danger. Yeah, I recently made a video about nihilism, and you were one of the people I had seen call themselves a nihilist. But you weren't the only one. And actually, it's a video I've made many times about the futility of nihilism. So my purpose is twofold. One, I shall share what I have figured out through 6 years or so of having encountered and talked with Ethelists and in Manham on many occasions. But also offer a critique of nihilism. Not of the position you actually have, but of calling it nihilistic, because I think that you want to talk about using metaphors of manliness or unmanliness. Nihilism's a big unmanly wimp out. Of course you have views you live by. You prefer beer to wine or wine to beer. You know, getting up early to staying up late. You live as though things matter. And you go, but no, nothing really matters. But I'll get back to that. And that's not the only part. I also am going to explain a bit this Ethelism. But you already understand, I see, but I can emphasize, I think. You know, you were discussing why it's not futile. Futile. And you were, pardon me, you know, I've been sick today. I have a bit of a headache, you know. My voice is hoarse. But why it's not futile to respond to the Ephelis. And this is a broad thing in internet discussion, really, is how many people end up deciding it's futile. And the reason is because they have this impossible goal of, like, convincing the other person. Like, they actually believe the other person's gonna go, oh, right, you're right, I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. The only time I've ever seen that happen is people in the middle are going, I don't know. And even then, I can kind of see which way they're likely to go based on more fundamental things that add up to these, you know, temporary group affiliation type things. So that's what's futile, thinking you're going to convince other people. Now, at that situation, a scientific-minded person would think, well, you know, what is the purpose? And the cynic would go, oh, there's none. And they might leave, and some of them just keep doing it like, well, I don't know, I'm addicted to it. But a more scientific approach is to assume, well, yes, there's a purpose that can at least be deduced, you know. Whether it's the motivation, whether it's just an epiphenomenological description, whatever. There's got to be something that could be, that's causing this, you know, an emotional gratification or whatever. Now, obviously, since everything is ultimately about emotional gratification, it is going to be an emotional gratification. But it's more like, this is a chance to speak positively about life. If you just open up your channel and go, life is good and blah, 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 that's not the message that you want to say about life. Nothing bad about it, you know. If you know world situations in history even a little bit, you know, oh yeah, it's pretty fucked up. So you don't want to just come on this other side. It's very hard to come up and speak in defense of living. You have to go encounter depression and whatnot. Now, as that, Ethelism is like the polio vaccine, you know, version of polio. Yeah, it's, strictly speaking, it's polio, but it's it's inured to various things. I mean, one, I had in the past, way past in my 20s, you know, come to realize, you know, if you want people that are really depressed, people that are on the edge of offing themselves, are it's not really good to talk to them about how good life could be, or life, you know, unless you know them personally. You could trigger a reaction and stuff. Whereas the Ethelists, they've refined their idea to such that, well, no, they're not going to commit suicide. You know, they seem as robust as any group of people. And they maintain sort of their cynicism of just going on, much like you describe nihilism when you abstract how they're living. You know, their philosophy in terms of how they're living, not what they necessarily, what they say. There's two different spheres of philosophy. All right. So I've noticed that most of us that have spent time criticizing or arguing against Ethelism, we actually come from, like what you were saying. You know, we, if anything, could, you know, there's mainstream culture, at least traditionally now, people are so many weird kinds of cynicism, but, you know, just the mainstream, you know, life, yeah, get married, have kids, and, you know, it's that we're the cynical ones. But we're not really cynical. It's just realism. That's the way we see it. So the Ethelists are a chance to argue for life without being ridiculous about it. Right? You said ethics is for bitches, and see, that's where this is why I don't advocate people pretending they're nihilists. I don't believe that. Even an ethic of I just do whatever's best for myself is a kind of an ethic. I would call it a corrupt ethic, but it depends what criteria you choose. Now, how do you choose them? You'd say there is no ultimate criteria. Yeah, there is. There's the one you decide to choose. You. It's like, well, we need just one ultimate judge. Well, we do have one ultimate judge. It's called that ego, or the ego and the id together, or whatever, that hard problem consciousness. The fact that you have that one feeling of what we look at the brain and it's made of millions of different things, and still it feels in some senses a one thing. That's the ultimate arbiter. Oh, but that's just me. Yeah, right. Well, just me can decide I want to listen to the opinions of other people. I want to take them into account. It doesn't change. You're still getting all of that through your perceptions. You're making all of your judgments based on your perceptions, and whether you like it or not, you're the ultimate arbiter. So you shouldn't think of yourself as a god. And the problem, excuse me, with believing in God is that that's the only unity you have available, is your own subjective stream of consciousness. And so people who believe in God have a tendency of making sentences of like, God thinks this, God thinks that, that really are, I think this and I think that. So you say there's no ethics. Well, that's bullshit. You can have an ethics that's judged by yourself. That's what my ethics is judged by. You know, and there's spheres of things that I would expect agreement with. Like, it's not okay just to physically assault other people for fun. But there's a lot more, of course, that I don't think other people should share with me, but I still have and happen to share with other people. Like, I like coffee in the morning. I don't really expect other people to like coffee in the morning, but a lot of people do. So there's incidental empirical overlaps that I can take into account or not as I see fit. But I can't pretend to think nothing matters. That's a lie. That's a cowardly lie. I wouldn't characterize the Ethelists as a whole group, really, but there's several subgroups. Some people have fought for social justice and not seen the kind of progress that they would count as success. You might have seen, you know, regress. Some are in comfortable lives but are aware of how, you know, the cynical reality of geopolitics and nature, at least maybe in an overblown cartoonish way, but they're not blind to these horrors, and through their own feeling of, well, I don't want to go through that and that's what life's really like, they just sit tight and count their lucky stars. Which makes ethylism a lot like a nihilism, where I think they're both excuses to not be active. Like, well, there is no perfectly right thing. It's like, I don't care if it's perfectly right to have a good freeway from New York to California. I just want one. Am I willing to make y'all slaves to build one? No, but I'm willing to go, hey, what do you guys want one? And lo and behold, we might be able to all want and pay for one. So I think that a nihilism and an ethylism is a kind of nihilism, where you're off the hook for talking about what you really desire, what you really work for, because it doesn't matter, and blah, blah, blah. The positions like these, you know, they're not really explainable in terms of a material judgment of like, well, do you think it's possible to do this? Or the logic of, hey, it's just neurological systems creating the negative value. Why, if that's an objective negative value, why can't the neural systems that create the positive value be real? I made those arguments years ago. And they just really don't pertain to why. People have different reasons for thinking that life sucks and it's not just temporary. You know, Gary, if there was some magic button to clean up the corruption and bullshit, and basically we could live in a libertarian type society, but there was cooperation and good infrastructure and people's vote, you know, for all the incidentals that we have to vote on. If that could be accomplished, he probably wouldn't be an ethylist necessarily, but I still think he'd be an antinatalist, a generational antinatalist, in the sense of, well, I didn't want to have kids type, you know, but not necessarily advocating everybody should die off. He just doesn't think that's possible, right? Where there's other people that, like I was saying, you know, have a totally different perspective that comes down to, you know, instead of 2 + 2 = 4, it's, you know, 5 - 1 = 4. And they come from a different angle. And so you have to look at it. It's like if you were studying a lake, it's filled, let's say, with 5 streams, you know, right? You can't go and study the lake and say, oh, where does all this water come from? And expect one answer. It's going to be chaotic. And then to sort it out, you're going to have to find the streams, right? And trace those if you want. You know, and the most important one, of course, is your own, which you seem to understand. You seem to be realizing you're talking to them because it makes you feel better. But I think but you did put it sort of as a dig and maybe as a joke. So let me just emphasize that as a reality. It's like to get anywhere with a language requires a dialectical process. And so we choose, you know, we choose carefully who we interact with.